Hey, Martin Shelford here, shopboard leader. A lot of what I talk and write about really centres on my conviction that organisations that embrace a much more fluid approach are not only a great deal faster and more agile than their competitors, but much more resilient and ultimately more successful too. Now, the work I'm undertaking is applicable to a multitude of different institutions, but today I'm going to focus more on businesses and we're going to ask a single question. And that question is this: what does fluidity in business actually mean? Now, fluidity in business is not a methodology, it's not a strategic mechanism, it's a lot more anatomical than that. It's something that must sit at the absolute core of a business's DNA, the way it thinks, the way it decides, the way people execute, the way it adjusts, and crucially, when something has gone wrong, the way it chooses to recover from that. It spawns from a collective acknowledgement of three truths. The first of those truths is that past successes in business guarantee nothing about future relevance. The second is that the future, especially in periods of industrial revolution such as what we're facing today, is not something that can be reliably predicted. And finally, to stand still in the face of change and technological advancement is really to put our own businesses and the livelihood to the people that depend on them in real jeopardy. Now, the antidote to a rapidly evolving world is not to stand still, but it's to move. So, fluidity is a business's antidote to our new, very fast, very unpredictable reality. And it must be ingrained into every single fibre of an organisation. It must be ingrained into the proposition. So, what a business exists to deliver to its customers. It must be ingrained into their strategy, the direction the business is taking, and the investments it's choosing to make. It has to be ingrained into structure, so how teams organise themselves to deliver, into decision making and how choices are made in response to problems or opportunities that the business faces at any point, into its governance, its processes, its approvals, its cadence and its reporting that they have in place, into its planning of financial and strategic cycles that are adopted, and finally into its working formats to match the ebbs and flows or the peaks and troughs that can exist in many a business. The list goes on, and over the coming weeks and months, we're going to explore each of these in turn. But first, let's consider what a business actually is and how fluidity challenges that very definition. Now, typically, if we were asked to explain a business, we'd probably refer to it as an entity that exists to serve a select group of customers or markets with a set of products or services. For example, what is Walmart? Well, it's a multi-channel retailer that exists to serve millions of consumers worldwide with everything from groceries to electricals. What is BMW? Well, it's a manufacturer of cars and other vehicles. What's HSBC? Well, it's a global financial institution. What's Maersk? Well, it's a shipping giant that serves global trade. Now, these businesses are decades old institutions and they hold really dominant positions in their own markets. But they and even the thousands of others that hold a membership at the multi-billion-dollar enterprise club represent only a tiny fraction of the organizations across the globe. So these enterprise companies have big, healthy balance sheets and very, very loyal customer bases. And these allow them to endure market change through their influence over the market trajectory itself and the behaviors of the customers and their partnership base, but also through their ability to take considerable bets on new markets, new technologies, safe in the knowledge that if they don't work out, the core of their business is still healthy and still very cash rich. It really does take a lot to kill these Goliaths. But what about the millions of businesses worldwide who do not share such a healthy balance sheet and who are not as dominant in their markets as these Goliaths are? How do they endure market change? The reality, unfortunately, is that many do not. We all know the stories of Blockbuster, BlackBerry, Nokia, who arguably had everything they needed to last, but somehow screwed it up. But there are other less well-known organizations that put up a real fight, but ultimately fell when the market goalpost shifted. For example, Phones for You in the UK, an incredibly successful retailer of mobile phones that faced market structure changes as mobile networks chose to cut out the middlemen and connect directly with consumers, leading it falling into administration in 2014. Borders, a big player in the book market that then fell as the internet gave birth to e-commerce. Organizations like Tower Records that failed to adjust to the rise of MP3 and latterly streaming and left them exposed to the CD market. Travel companies such as Flybe, a regional UK-based airline that ran into difficulty when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So the challenge for businesses across the world as we face deep and accelerating change, fueled not just by the advancements of technology and in particular AI, but by deteriorating trading conditions and a multitude of economic shocks, is this. Without the security of a multi-billion-dollar balance sheet and a market-leading position, how can you ensure you remain disciplined enough so as not to jeopardize your core business and your core income streams, but agile enough to also shift from product to product, market to market, channel to channel, without falling? The answer is fluidity. Look, despite most of us looking at organizations such as Amazon, HSBC, and Toyota in awe and envy, the reality is most of us do not run a business that can navigate massive change simply by spending the most amount of money. Instead, we must change our mentality about where we find safety. Safety is no longer to be found in being the biggest or the best in our field. It's found in flow, in movement, in speed, in responsiveness. Our new reality means that no market, no product, no distribution channel is immune to change. And I guess the uncomfortable truth is that the forces that are exerting themselves onto our markets far and wide are just simply too powerful for any organization to control or to have any great influence over. We can only really surrender to them and seek to move with them. How we define a business today is not necessarily how we need to define a business in the future. The products and services we make and sell will likely change. The verticals we serve will likely come and go. The routes by which we reach a market will transform. So we too must change, not just once, but constantly. When we consider how a business is designed and structured today, the ability to mold the market in real time is not easy. We have our business here, and that business is comprised of a multitude of products and or services that it sells potentially to different customer groups or verticals, all via different channels. Now we know there's a product life cycle for everything, so over time some of these products will draw less demand and will need to develop and launch replacements. These changes aren't new. Changing market conditions and the advancement of technology have for centuries been a core factor in business. The antidote has always been, though, product and service development and diversification, among other things. We accept the decline of elements of our core business, and over time, we design, build, and launch replacement ones. Problem sorted. Well, unfortunately not. There is one key difference between what our predecessors in business faced and what we face as leaders today: time. Today, change is just occurring at a rate that is unprecedented. Just consider how quickly AI has advanced in recent years. Think about the effect of rising popularism on global trade. Consider how climate change and conflicts across the world are constantly disrupting supply chains. As that natural product life cycles come to an end and customers and verticals shift, businesses face a great deal more exposure than they did before. Now, their responses are typically to develop replacement products and to diversify into new channels. But when faced with a ticking clock, this effort is not only complex and pressurized, but incredibly expensive. And as we know, expensive is not a word that businesses or their shareholders like to hear. Expensive creates fear, uncertainty. It fuels denial and inaction. It causes people to convince themselves that the market disruption they're facing is only temporary and the remaining profitable income streams their business has, well, they're going to be sufficient to see them through without needing to invest in new ones. However, that failure to face up to the hard truths of the new reality and to actually start investing in the future will kill more and more businesses in the years to come. There was a real problem in existence here. It's one thing to accept as a business leader or a shareholder that a company needs to move with the market and must therefore invest in new products, new channels, new income mechanisms. but it's actually a completely different thing to fund that, both in cash terms and in energy effort. Nimble, well-funded startups hold a real advantage over established businesses here. They are unencumbered by the need to continue servicing core customer base, to secure revenue and profits, and to satisfy the near-term demands of their shareholders. Established businesses, conversely, need to strike the right balance between delivering their core to ensure the money keeps coming in the short to the medium term, but while also somehow funding and creating the fresh income streams that will secure its long-term future. Established businesses, when faced with market change, risk entering a very, very tricky place. A place where they may be seeing declining revenue and profits that is putting pressure on leaders to cut costs. We see in the news daily reports of more businesses shedding headcount and cutting costs in attempts to counter a declining top line. But do we consider enough how these efforts might be compromising a business's ability to fuel a turnaround? See, if talent is lost, if core efficiency drives mean the remaining people can only focus on the delivery of the core day-to-day business, if cost savings are purely to hit year one profit expectations and to fund dividends, the organisation is ultimately starving itself of the optionality to make a transition. It's inadvertently putting itself into a vicious downward spiral, a downward spin that rarely has more than one possible ending: complete collapse. Far too many businesses fall in the face of market change, and market change itself is used as the excuse. But let's level with one another here. Very rarely is a market change something that's invisible up front. The signals are there, the conversations are happening among teams, the data begins to evidence change well in advance. But too often, for a variety of reasons, leaders fall into a state of denial or inaction. They hope things will change. They don't want to tell their board the bad news. They double down on their core business before finding themselves entering that downward spiral where forward strategy has to be paused in favour of near-term stabilisation efforts. The failure of a business to respond to market changes is rarely the fault of the market itself. It's the fault of the leaders who fail to acknowledge change and to respond in time. That said, there are thousands of leaders and businesses who do react, but then find it too difficult to challenge to reposition themselves and their businesses to thrive in the new reality. To understand why, we must see businesses not as a single entity, but as a collection of people, resources, shareholders, and partners who collectively are there to safeguard both the performance of the business today and also the resilience and relevance and the ongoing trajectory of the business going forward. Most leaders know their markets their businesses are changing and will continue to change as AI advances at a greater pace. Most people in business know that what they do on a day-to-day basis is being challenged. Large parts of their jobs are being automated. Most shareholders know that the shape of their investment portfolio will change as they attempt to reduce exposure to industries in decline and to ride the waves of new ones. Most vendors and partners are facing their own questions over what their role in this new reality is. Every single person within and associated with a business is facing a very personal change. And change, as we know, is something that takes a lot of time. The key question for businesses today is this: do you have enough time to change? Which brings me squarely into the point of this video. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of how organizations function and how fluidity can become the new norm, we must first look at how we design a business at a very high level. Businesses, predominantly, are a single entity that delivers a core set of products or services to a select number of customer groups or verticals. This design means that when certain products or channels are disrupted, the exposure the business faces increases. Is the challenge, therefore, simply one of speed of change? Is it purely about getting in front of the product lifecycle and developing replacements more quickly so that this exposure is reduced? Well, for some, possibly, if the perfect mix of cash reserves, shareholder backing, leadership intent, and talent availability combine to ensure the business to effectively find a balance between the core and the new. But for most, this just simply is not possible. We therefore need to start changing our thinking on what a business actually is? Now, this is a question that should encourage us to take a leaf from the modular technology architecture playbook. In this architecture, rather than having a complex network of systems that serve multiple purposes, an organization instead builds an infinite number of smaller, independent building blocks called modules. Each module handles a specific job and connects others through clear standard rules. As one module potentially faces a problem, the impact on the others is limited. If one module reaches the end of its life, it can be switched off easily without disrupting the performance of the whole. When a new module is required, it can be implemented and connected to others with little trouble. Now, modular architecture is built for what we call redundancy. From the very first day of a module being activated, there is a ticking clock. At some point in the future, we know it will reach the end of its usable life cycle and we will replace it with something better. And that's fine, that's progress. No module in modular architecture is expected to last forever, and no product, service, or market will last forever either. So instead of building businesses on the assumption or hope that they'll last forever, why don't we start building them for redundancy? Modular business architecture is all about fluidity. We do not know in advance where the best market opportunities are going to be, and we do not know where the biggest disruptions will occur. Think of it like a surfer riding the waves. The waves of the ocean are erratic and unpredictable. A surfer knows where they will ultimately want to get to, but it cannot possibly hope to plot the exact route from where they are now to this particular point in the future. So instead, they embrace a very fluid posture. They turn when they need to. They shift their balance in response to the waves. When they see a threat, they avoid it. When they see a building wave, they leap towards it. Fluid businesses, or what I call shortboard businesses, mimic this state. They remain light at their core and agile in their approach. They learn the lessons from modular system architecture and adopt them in the design of the business itself. At the very core is a very light, very strong parent business whose purpose is not to build and deliver products, but actually to build, benefit from, and then either sell or kill a whole host of smaller, hyper-focused business units. When a new market wave presents an opportunity, the parent business may choose to create a new ring-fenced business within a very clear mission and give it a supply of resources, talent, cash that their startup competitors could only dream of. Now, if a new business turns out not to be a winner, it is quickly killed before the sunk cost fallacy takes hold. But when a unit succeeds, the parent company reaps the benefits. Now, when it reaches the end of its life cycle, the parent company then faces a choice. It can sell it, or it can kill it, and it can return all of the resources, the talent, the cash, and the IP that's been collected back to the parent company to be redeployed. Of course, for many within established businesses, this more fluid modular approach might feel like something that is better suited for startups or is something that sits in a dreamland, if you like. But the reality is, it isn't necessarily a new concept. Some of the world's most successful institutions, businesses like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Virgin Group, well, they all adopt variations of a modular business architecture. They acquire or they build and invest in new businesses and brands. They kill the ones that fail quickly, so resources are not wasted. They reap the benefits from the successful ones, and then they sell or kill them when they reach the end of their life cycle. I get it though. For many of us, especially those like me with years of experience in more traditional organizational settings, we can struggle to get our heads around how we can shift from the large, heavy businesses that serve set markets with set products and services, what I call longboard businesses, to a much more fluid modular design. Well, that's something that we're going to explore layer by layer over the next weeks and months. But of course, you can, in the meantime, order a copy of my book, The Shortboard Business, to explore things further yourself, which will immerse you into all aspects of the challenge. There can be very little argument that we are facing a new reality. Data is the new oil, the most valuable commodity that we have. Technology is the new supply chain, the infrastructure that makes the world work. And AI has the potential to become, well, pretty much everything else. The question for us should not be, is the world changing? It is. But how must we adapt to a changing world? So the question I pose to every established and emerging leader out there is this. Are you going to double down on the heavy, robust, but difficult longboard structure that might have served you well to this point, but risks anchoring you to a reality that no longer exists? Or will you make the shift to the shortboard model and become a business designed for fluidity, a business designed to thrive in whatever conditions it faces? This is a question that you, and only you, can answer. If fluidity is your instinct, then follow me for more and check out shortboardbusiness.com.